they cannot tolerate having part of their country constantly under fire from Hezbollah, and by extension, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. That would be a strategic defeat for Israel. So they will use whatever means they can to try to return those residents to northern Israel.
And they'll do that without any real concern about the amount of anger that they're generating, even in the United States, as well as Europe and elsewhere, and concern more widely amongst countries that might be getting more friendly with them in the past. I'm thinking of the Gulf, perhaps, countries. They just proceed with this, whatever happens, and make their own rules.
Well, I don't detect a lot of anger rising in the United States about the operations in Lebanon so far. Certainly the administration would like there to be a de-escalation to avoid a wider regional conflict. But in the United States, at least, it is an easier political situation for the Biden administration and Israel, for Israel to be fighting Hezbollah and by extension Iran, than it is to be laying waste to the Gaza Strip. When it comes to Israel's world, certainly the kinds of things that Israel has done in the Gaza Strip have made things awkward for the Israelis. But I think also the government recognized that the Middle East would be better off without Hamas and Hezbollah. And that's why the Israelis have gotten kind of, at least when it comes to Lebanon, a certain kind of tacit support. And when it comes to Gaza, none of those countries have actually severed diplomatic relations with Israel. So the Israelis are getting mixed signals. Certainly Western Europe and other parts of the world have been extremely critical of Israeli operations. United States and its Arab partners less so.
Stephen Cook there. So how's Lebanon dealing with the bombardment and the flow of people fleeing the south of the country? Last week on this program, we spoke about the situation of Hani Bolsari in Beirut. He's the president of the Syndicate of Food Importers there. I caught up with him again the last few hours. How have things changed?
Today is definitely an exceptional day. Whatever we have been fearing of since the beginning of the events on October 7th of last year, whereby there is a major attack on the Lebanese people. There have been massive runs on supermarkets and on petrol stations. So we can say, unfortunately, that the people in Lebanon are living a very, very difficult time. We are monitoring day by day what is happening or what will happen in the coming few days. This is a very difficult moment for Lebanon. I'm not saying that things haven't changed. I mean, most of Lebanon is still functioning, continuing what I have told you to 1 week ago, and I can also maintain and confirm that the spirit, in spite of all the difficulties, is still the same. In spite of everything, people are helping each other. Whoever is moving out from the south is being greeted by other Lebanese people in other regions. So we can see that there is definitely a global outreach between Lebanese people, in spite of all the difficulties between them.
Okay, well, you said earlier that there were problems with supermarkets operating in Beirut. How are people managing now? Can they get the food they need? Is there power? All these kinds of things?
We have been kind of expecting it or waiting for it, or of course hoping it will not happen, but it is happening. So we were waiting for that moment if it happens. And we have assured the population, and I'm still assuring, that there is no issues so far on the food supply chain. There is enough food in the supermarkets and the warehouses, with the importers, with the industrials, to stay for more than 2 or 3 months. In spite of all the problems that we're having, as long as the port is still open, which is still, and as long as it is functioning, there will be no problem in the food supply chain.
Hani Bolsari there, it's a grim...
Yes, and from India's perspective, it's a war that could upset. I mean, India is right now looking at raising economic growth, is trying to move ahead. And every time conflict erupts in the world, it affects the kind of the growth path that India has been trying to achieve. And if you see Lebanon, in the Middle East, these are the oil production areas. And this is something that can affect oil prices. Right now, so far it hasn't. Oil prices have remained relatively low, but things can worsen.
They certainly can. And Peter, I mean, this conflict is really causing major headaches in Washington too, isn't it?
Well, not so much as this is in Gaza, to be honest, because, the Palestinians are very well represented in American universities and very capable of creating street demonstrations, shutting down campuses and the rest. The Lebanese not. You're not seeing the same kind of reactions, Israeli actions here when it comes to Lebanon. Maybe that will materialize, but I don't see it happening.
It's strange in a way because there are a lot of Lebanese people, ethnically Lebanese people in the US, aren't there?
Well, there are, but Lebanon is a small country, and you don't have the radicalized element that you do among the Palestinians. The Palestinians really are ambivalent or hostile towards Israel. The Lebanese are not, and what you've got is a terrorist group up there that's kind of like embedded in the population, but is kind of separate from the Lebanese psyche, so to speak. And we don't associate Lebanon with being anti-Israel. We associate terrorists with being anti-Israel, and if the Israelis can take them out, nobody's complaining here.
Well, we'll see how that progresses. Of course, we've got the UN General Assembly underway, so there'll be a lot of talk coming out of the US, probably from New York, in the next few days. Now, let's talk about a tech company, Intel. It's a company you're rather likely to have heard of, probably the name on the microprocessor inside your computer. It's been one of the largest computer components makers on the planet, but recent developments in the industry haven't been kind to the California-based company. In the most recently completed quarter, Intel generated just $2.3 billion in cash flow from its operations. It said it would lay off 15,000 workers and cut annual operating expenses from $25 billion to less than $18 billion. This year, its share price has already fallen by nearly 60%. And now, it's being widely reported it might be up for sale. Ryan Gould, deals reporter at Bloomberg News, told me what he knew.
I think I would caution at the outset that anyone at Intel, bearing in mind the company hasn't obviously commented on the reporting, would say that they're not up for sale at all. One thing I can tell you is that, as with any company in this kind of situation, facing down what is looking to be quite a costly turnaround effort, you are going to get attracting interest from financial buyers, strategic buyers, and in this case, we've reported, as have other outlets over the weekend, Qualcomm. Qualcomm is a big rival to Intel. Like Intel, it operates in the sort of personal computer chips business. It makes chips that we find in smartphone handsets, in our computers, and so on. And so this approach, as we learned, Qualcomm has floated a friendly takeover as the company looks to revive itself as part of, I think, as you put at the top there, part of the turnaround effort that Patrick Gelsinger, Intel's CEO, has outlined.
Yeah, clearly there's an issue in the company. I mean, how has it come to this? Because, as I say, for most people, Intel is a big part of the systems, probably in their computers. It seems to be not in a good place as far as business generally is concerned.
That's true, and one of the problems for Intel, and I think this certainly predates Pat Gelsinger, the current CEO at Intel, is that over the years, as they've tried to sort of build out a business that focuses on the manufacturing of those chips that we find in our computers, they found that to be a very, very costly effort. And so building out chips like that at scale takes a lot of money. It's very capital expenditure sensitive. So you're essentially always behind the curve almost. And part of that effort to make sure that part of their business really excels is bringing outside customers to, allow it to sell those chips at a higher volume, at a higher pace. As it stands, Intel's main customer for its foundry business, i.e. the manufacturing business, is itself. So the challenge for Intel has been trying to bring on a customer that it can actually sell chips to at a rate fast enough to build a profit. So we reported exclusively over the weekend that Apollo, the massive global alternative asset manager, has approached Intel offering to invest about up to $5 billion. This is kind of being seen as a big vote of confidence in Patrick Gelsinger. It's seen as a firm as large as Apollo getting behind something as storied as Intel.
Ryan Gould there at Bloomberg. So will Intel get bought out? Malcolm Penn's a semiconductor industry analyst.
Yes, I mean, I think it really is a riches to rags story, really, when you think about it, because they were the number one chip company in the world for a long period of time, about 25 years or more. And suddenly they find themselves at the other end of the scale where they're in trouble. And it's something which has been brewing for quite a long time, really. And part of it was due to their very success, because they did have a monopoly, a near monopoly in the PC marketplace. And sometimes that stops the progress. It stops you the pressure to learn. It stops the process, the pressure to innovate. And they did allow themselves to fall behind. And then they had what could be only described as a Decca Beatles moment when they turned down Apple when Steve Jobs approached them to build the iPhone chip. But they turned that down, and immediately that allowed TSMC not only to take the Apple business, which is still a very profitable one for them today, but also helped TSMC to take over that leadership position. So it really is a riches to rags story.
Yeah. And they seem to, and I gather they missed the boat a bit also on the whole AI revolution, which is obviously what's the big thing in tech at the moment.
Yes, I mean, I think that took everybody by surprise, because overnight ChatGPT came onto the market and turned the whole thing on its head. And the trouble is, the chips that they've been building for the last 30 or so years require a lot of computing power to do a very simple set of tasks, calculating type tasks, but very fast. Whereas what the ChatGPT applications needed was to do somewhat simpler tasks, but to do hundreds and thousands of them at the same time. So it needed a different architecture, and there was NVIDIA with that technology, because that's what the graphics people need for their games. And they were there to pick up the ball.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, and then briefly, if you would, can Patrick Gielsinger, the CEO, turn it all around, do you think?
I think it's a tough challenge, because they're certainly losing money, they're having to lay off staff, and that's going to be a tough nut to crack to get the good people they need to come to the company. When the company's on the rocks, good people tend not to want to join.
Understandable, perhaps. Malcolm Penn there. Peter, I know you've been taking quite an interest in the roads of Intel. Yeah, what's your thoughts on this and what Pat Gielsinger can do?
The first thing is that a lot of this is being attributed to artificial intelligence, and that is a factor. But the reality is that Intel has fallen behind in chip design itself across the board. It's really number 4 after Samsung and some others when it comes to fabrication and design of new chips. It really has become kind of the General Motors of the chip business. The other thing is that people can invest in it. They can buy the company if they like, but the foundry business for years now has been unable to keep up with TSMC and Samsung. Forget about costs; their costs are higher, but forget about that. They simply can't produce the same quality of chips.
Yeah.
So in reality, with the shift to AI did was just reveal all of those weaknesses. Frankly, they're the General Motors of the semiconductor.
Yeah, I like that phrase. Yeah, the General Motors. It's very telling, isn't it? That exists in the
kind of
world
slow, sloggy, second rate. And so my feeling, but the real problem here is the Biden administration, with its grandiose industrial policy, which the Europeans I know love. The largest recipient of grants and subsidies under the program to resurrect the semiconductor industry in the United States is Intel.
Right. Well,
so basically, it's a classic example of lemon socialism.
Yeah. Oh, well, we can have everything. Sushma, let me bring you on this, because I mean, this is such an obviously open goal in a way for Indian tech, isn't it? The whole chip industry is surely ripe for that.
Yes, unfortunately, Intel has not been doing chip making in India. I mean, they've been going into other areas of computers. In fact, they signed an agreement to do laptop manufacture. But there was an aborted attempt by Intel way back in 2006. They offered to set up a chip factory, but the then government kind of dithered over it and didn't do anything. And now when the government is trying to, move ahead in a big way with, manufacture of semiconductors, Intel is certainly not on board. So other companies are there. Yeah. But Intel has always been big in India.
Yeah, so but is it, I mean, you say that the country's moving ahead with chip manufacturing. Is it a big thing now in India?